Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you're all doing well and keeping safe today. Going to be talking about centre-back targets in today's video. Who could fix Chelsea's defensive woes next season? Who could Chelsea bring in to fix the defensive issues Frank Lampard has had consistently in the 1920 season? I'm going to be looking at that. But before we get into any of that, I want to ask you guys, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also, do me a favour by hitting that like button if you're enjoying the content, because it helps out the channel as well. But let's get into it. Firstly, with Fikayo Tomori, because the story about targets that I'm referencing starts off talking about mainly about Fikayo Tomori and a potential loan to Rennes in Ligue 1 next season. As you can see here from Simon Johnson in The Athletic, Rennes have opened talks with Chelsea about the possibility of signing England international Fikayo Tomori on loan for next season. Sources have told The Athletic that the Ligue 1 side, who finished third this season and will enter the third qualifying round of the Champions League, want Tomori to strengthen their backline. It is understood that Rennes face competition from clubs in England and across Europe for the 22-year-old, although no decision has been taken by Chelsea on his future yet. Chelsea want to improve their defence by signing a centre-back. West Ham's Declan Rice is their first choice for the role, even though he plays as a midfielder for their London rivals. But other backup options include Atletico Madrid's Jose Gimenez, Brighton's Lewis Dunk and Burnley's James Tarkowski. Firstly, the Tomori loan. I think it makes sense. The noise we're hearing around Fikayo Tomori, it does seem to be leaning in a direction that he will be going on loan somewhere next season, considering Chelsea's efforts to improve defensively next year. I think it is a bit of a shame considering how well Fikayo Tomori did at the start of the season for Frank Lampard. Him and Zuma were brilliant, the best centre-back partnership we had for a short period of time, yes, and unfortunately Tomori's form dropped as well. Rudiger, I think, came back from injury and Frank Lampard relied on him instead of Tomori. I think Tomori got injured around sort of the December-January time, which ruled him out the first team, and then he got injured again before the restart. So it's been a bit disappointing, the lack of minutes he's had in the end of the season, really. I was a bit surprised that he got no minutes against Bayern Munich as well. But we spoke about before West Ham potentially coming in for him for a loan, and now Rennes. I think Rennes is a good option potentially. I'd like to see Tomori get Champions League football somewhere next season. He can't just be sitting on the bench for Chelsea next season. It's not going to help his development. You know, I think back to another loan, LOFTUS-CHEEK. Yes, it got small glimpses in the first team for Chelsea, but then went on loan to Crystal Palace, and I believe it was 17-18. I thought that was a brilliant loan move for his career. Maybe Tomori it could be the same, even though he broke into the first team this year. I also think this relates to who gets sold for Chelsea. I've spoken a lot about this recently, who Chelsea sell this summer. I think if both Rudiger and Christensen leave, I think Tomori might stay, because I just think rotation-wise, Chelsea need backup in defence. No matter what you think about the current centre-backs, I think, you know, Frank Lampard will want a squad. You know, we can't just have, you know, 2 or 3 defenders. You need about 4 defenders for Chelsea. Yes, you could argue that, you know, you've got Azpilicueta who could fill in there, but really, I'd like 4 natural centre-backs in our squad next season, and it could be a similar scenario to what happened last year. If you remember, Tomori could have gone out on loan, but David Luiz leaving meant Tomori stayed, and then he got his opportunity. And then we move on to what do Chelsea need from a new centre-back. For me, we need a dominant, commanding, no-nonsense centre-back, an organiser of that defence. And, you know, of course, there's the obvious options of like Koulibaly, but I think that's a ridiculous fee. I just think it's unrealistic this summer. So we may have to go for a short-term option or someone that, you know, you may not associate as sort of a big defender. I've referenced this before, so before I go into the targets, I also think it's on Frank Lampard and how he structures his defence from set pieces. You know, what are we going to do? Are we going to commit to zonal marking or man marking? At times this season, we've done a bit of both, but really set piece-wise, it's never improved. Yes, Frank Lampard has talked about height, but I also think in transition, it's a big thing for Chelsea and Lampard. So we aren't so easily susceptible at counter-attacks and transitions. And no matter what defender you bring in, if we're constantly getting our centre-backs isolated because midfield can't help protect that defence, it's always going to be an issue. So it's on Frank Lampard as well, no matter who he buys. I've spoken about that before. But let's go into the targets. Jose Gimenez, firstly, 25, Atletico Madrid defender, Uruguayan international, under Simeone. I mean, amazing defensive structure Atletico Madrid have. I mean, very much suits their style, and as well, he's had lots of Champions League experience over the years. I remember him playing against Chelsea in the group stage a few years back. Very impressive defender, and very much what you'd want from a defender. Very much has everything that Chelsea lack, and I think the Champions League experience for me is a big thing, and potentially could come in and do a job alongside Kurt Zouma. I think him and Zouma could form a good partnership, adding what Chelsea need at the back in sort of different ways. This will probably cost more than other defenders that I'm going to talk about next, but I think it'd be a really solid option if Declan Rice can't be bought this summer by Chelsea, who seems to be the first choice option for Frank Lampard and the club. Now moving on to Lewis Dunk, 28, Brighton centre-back, is also a Chelsea fan apparently, which is a positive. A physical centre-back, not the worst with the ball at his feet. Graham Potter has wanted to instill instill a possession-based philosophy to the Seagulls this season. He's also a massive threat at set pieces going forward. Aerial presence in both boxes, which is something Lampard has called for. Longevity of a player like Dunk, given his age and ability, will be of concern. And also, I think, as I'm going to bring up with the next target, which I'll just quickly talk about, James Tarkowski at Burnley, you know, the style of play, very defensive. Does that style cover his inefficiencies as a centre-back, especially on the ball? I think with both, they're both negative for me with Dunk and Tarkowski. I think the concern with this is their teams and sort of the high line Lampard wants to play with his defenders. I think, you know, Chelsea want to be a very proactive, progressive team on the pitch. He wants his defenders and fullbacks to push very high when we are in possession. And just the concern with players like that, if Chelsea are going to be very attacking as they have been this season, could those players be caught out with pace if they don't have sufficient protection in front of them? And especially if, you know, players like Tarkowski is very used to sitting very deep for Burnley, would he struggle in a team that wants to sit much higher? I think that's a concern. I think at times you've seen Harry Maguire struggle with that, with Man United adapting from Leicester last season to Man United this season, playing in a team that's always on the front foot and mostly will have a lot of the ball. I think that's a concern. I prefer Lewis Dunk much more to Tarkowski. Dunk, especially on the ball, I think is a little bit better, and that aerial presence for me in both boxes is massive for Chelsea. And I think Dunk, although I'm sure will be rejected by people just because he plays for Brighton, I think when you actually watch him, and I've watched him multiple times this season, I've always been impressed by his commanding presence for that Brighton team. Even though if you look at the stats of Brighton and say, oh, they've conceded more than us, think about the quality of player at Brighton, think about the quality of player at Chelsea, and we've conceded, I think, equally amount of goals to them. So it's been really poor from Chelsea defensively this year, and I don't just want to look at players and reject them instantly because of the club they play for. I think Lewis Dunk, yes, would be a short-term option, but I think could potentially add what Chelsea need at the back: presence, no-nonsense defending, aerial presence well in the box, and height. That's something Chelsea have lacked as well. Lampard has concerned about this season. So I think Dunk would be a decent option once again if those options like Jimenez and Declan Rice aren't available this summer. Lastly, I want to talk about John Stones, because John Stones has been touted recently by a number of people, and I know people have been discussing it online, debating it. For me, John Stones, I just don't see it being a good move at all. I just don't think he adds what Chelsea need. Chelsea do not need another centre-back who's decent on the ball. For me, it's just another Andreas Christensen, really. It's just another player of that sort of ilk. And as you've seen at Manchester City, there's a reason why they just bought Nathan Ake. There's a reason why they're looking to improve defensively. There's a reason why John Stones isn't a first-choice centre-back for Pep Guardiola anymore. And it's because he's not reliable enough. He, a bit like Andreas Christensen, can be done. He can make massive mistakes for Man City, and Guardiola isn't going to tolerate it. And there's a reason why steadily at Manchester City he's declined in his role there. So I think that's something to consider as well. He's not a player that's been consistently relied upon. I think earlier in the season, I don't know if he was injured, but I remember Fernandinho playing in the role for Laporte at times. That shows you the trust, I think, Guardiola, the lack of trust Guardiola has for John Stones at the moment. So I just don't see why Chelsea would want to bring in a player like that who doesn't add anything new to our backline, and very much for me is as susceptible to mistakes as, say, Andreas Christensen or Antonio Rudiger. So for me, it's a non-starter. Even if it could be like 20 million or something, I don't think it's worth it to spend money in that area. Maybe as a rotational player, but for me, if that's the case, just keep Andreas Christensen or Antonio Rudiger for me. I mean, it makes no sense signing John Stones. I just don't think it's a good enough player for what we need currently. But that is it for today's edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Please let me know your opinions on everything I spoke about today in terms of centre-back targets. Who do you think Chelsea could sign out of the current ones to improve our defensive line next season? Also, Lampard, how do you think he can improve his defensive structure next season? Please let me know in the comments below. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter at Son of Chelsea. Have a great day, and I'll see you again.